right. I was just about to say, YouTube done violated. YouTube done violated. They ain't sent out my links. I think it's something to that timing thing, though. I got to figure it out. Because, like, when you set the time for a certain time, I believe if you go late, or you go early, like, they don't be sending your joint how they supposed to. Yeah. So we got to have like a review. We gotta go back into our probability bag. Shout out to all the Patreon folks. Shout out to all the Patreon folks that got the Money Mind State book over the weekend. Shout out to the Patreon folks that got the Money Mind State over the weekend. Yeah. So if you've been on the Patreon, even the folks that's on the Patreon that's not like up to date, like they not current, you know what I mean? We still went ahead and sent out the Money Mind State with a little email that says, basically, as long as it's for, uplifting the movement, you have the rights to go on ahead and chop that thing up, use it to rewrite your, to start your book, go crazy on social media if you want, like, take some clips, some lines, make some posts on the gram. Yep. I see Freddie in the building, Tika in the building. But yeah, so we got that out. The problem was, I know it was like a super delay, but the problem was I kept trying to figure out different ways to send it out via Patreon. And there was no way for me to really do that. So I just had to send it from like email, like just send it from Gmail. Yeah, I just wound up sending it from Gmail. So if you got a Gmail email, Melanin versus Diabetes, and you haven't opened it up because you're like, what is this? Open that up. Yeah, open that up. You might have not, you might have thought somebody was trolling, or I don't know what I'm strict with my emails as well. But yeah, we sent that out exclusive. Yeah, the vote. It's funny we talking about probability and we mentioned vote, but the vote didn't come back. The vote was too all over the place, family. I know we took like a little poll on it. Yeah, we took like a little live poll on. I don't know if everybody watching this or maybe watching live or watching the playback or whatever the case may be, because I know it's different people watch, catch the videos when they can. But maybe a couple of weeks ago, we did like a live, and I was asking people like what book would they like to get, and people were all over the place. People were so all over the place. Yeah, people were so all over the place that I just went with the home team. Like, the children made the suggestion, and I thought that that was a way to go. Like, yeah. I mean, we got people in the Patreon that suggested it as well. I don't want to take away nobody's credit, but when the children really like made the case for it. So it's like, no, Dad, you know what? They do have the ability to get all of the books that's on Amazon. Technically, you should give them something that they can't get. You should give them one of your books that they can't get anymore. And so Money Mind State is probably my favorite book out of all of my my unpublished or out of print books. Now, let me say this. Let me hit y'all with a disclaimer. Right? Let me hit y'all with a disclaimer. The disclaimer is you definitely have to do your research. You definitely have to do your research, like research, because that book is old as that book is definitely I don't know when I printed it, but I wrote it a while before I printed it. So that book is definitely 20 years old, maybe. At the least it's 15 years old. I would probably lean closer to, yeah, somewhere around there, 15, 20 years old. So yeah. Whatever you find in that book. Whatever you find in that book, you I'm giving y'all the carte blanche to do what y'all want, but well, within reason, but definitely double check, because science gets outdated, you know what I'm saying? Plus, I've learned, you know what I'm saying, a bunch of stuff in 15, 20 years, right? I'm still in student mode, right? So definitely cross-check whatever before you print it in your book or go out on a limb with it. Right? Not the whole book, Freddie. Hold on. What is this? Dang, how do I see? Let me see if I can find this thing. Is that what I think it is? That'd be kind of crazy if you still have that link. Let me see what this is. Can I? Oh, why can't I see it? All right, well, let me try to type it up because it's not coming up in the chat. It's not coming up in the chat. Let me see if I can type that up. Man, peace and peace be upon your soul. Man, I think we're just gonna let that marinate for a little while. We're just gonna let that marinate for a little while. Shout out to Peyton. Shout out to Peyton. But yeah, we're gonna get into our probability bag. And talk about when I get into the probability, when I get into the probability conversation, sometimes I get a little lost in thought, because I start thinking about all kinds of different things. I got he passed now, but one of my best friends, his name is Desmond. And I think about him. I think about my little brother that just passed recently. I try to focus my mind on something else, but they always come to mind. And yeah, like Desmond, Desmond was with me in high school. Like we was every day, 7:00 in the morning, he's whistling for me outside my window. From 7:00 in the morning, we together till the nighttime, till this time, dap up, he go to his crib, you know what I'm saying? I take it in, wake up, do it again, like every single day. So when I started to make different changes, he was with me. You know what I'm saying? He was with me. He shared, you know what I'm saying? Like every time I would stumble onto something, every time I would stumble onto a piece of information or something that was life-changing, he was there. When Amber got hit by the car, he was there. When I bring her home from the hospital, he was there. When everybody flipped on me, Crystal, my family, her family, like everybody, because they thought I was, messing up Amber's chance for healing and blah, blah, blah. He was there. You know what I'm saying? Like, And he always had the same, like, yo, I'm about to get on this. I'm about to get on this with you. You know what I'm saying? Friday, or either this Friday, I'm going to get started, or this Monday, like after the weekend. You know, he must have said that to me for 15 years straight. He must have said that to me for 15 years straight. He was 2 years younger than me. And eventually he had a heart attack. He's no longer with us. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm saying whatever road I'm on, we was on the road together. Beers, cigarettes, blunts. You know what I'm saying? The same food, you know. If he ain't got no money, I'm giving him half of mine, vice versa. You know what I'm saying? So it was no different. Like, but as I start to, you know, have these mind expanding experiences, you know, where I would come across some information and I'm like, yo, I'm getting ready to start doing this, or I'm getting ready to stop doing this, or yo, they're not going to see me on the block for a minute because, you know, when I leave school, I'm going to just head straight downtown to the bookstore, or yo, I'm not eating that no more. I'm getting ready to start getting food from over here. Yo, they got this Indian restaurant over here. Yo, they got this Greek spot over here. You know, just little individual at the time, the changes seemed like you couldn't really notice the changes. You know, you couldn't really notice the changes. You couldn't really notice the difference. You know, it was still the same, you know, energy, you know, still moving a certain type of way, but the small differences is happening. Variables just changing one variable at a time. One variable at a time. You know, and unfortunately, he's not my, you know, I don't have one story like that. So where some people be scared to tell their age after 40, I'd be happy to say I'm 47. Like, yo, I get to be 47. They'd be like, yo, you up there, you a unk now. I'm like, unk. I'm grandpa. I'm not unk. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it's variables. That's it. That's the magic. The magic is variables. You know, that's the science. That's the science. The science of like, you know, if you want to trip out and expand your mind out into a space where, you know, it's multi dimensions and multiple planets and you know, there's a different bunch of yous. You know, there's a different bunch of yous. There's a different bunch of there's a million, there's an infinite number of patents. Right? If you want to get into those multi-string, multi-dimension type of conversations, the way you tap in is divination, is probability. That's the whole thing to really get. Like, and I think it's probably the missing. And I kind of been trying to have this conversation for a long time because I noticed a trend, like maybe just before all the elders start dying, I noticed a trend. And the trend was nobody in the spiritual community believes in spirituality. I noticed the invasion. And this one I kind of start going hard, pause, on the chakra folks, with the fake, with all of the foolishness. Now y'all see it popping up everywhere. You thought polite was, no, you see nature, you see Gorilla Hebrew. You know what I'm saying? Like Brother Panic, you see in a lot of different things that's like, wow, this wasn't something to laugh off. EnQi wasn't just going on rants and tirades and acting a fool on the internet for no reason, right? Because the overall trend was, it wasn't just atheism or agnosticism, right? People being agnostic or saying, God doesn't exist, or I don't have enough evidence to say I believe in God or not, right? It was a total opposite. It was like a culture of deception and Satanism, and it was a whole nother type of energy coming in. And I'm like, there never really was a divide between, if you really go back to the roots of where modern science comes from, it was never a divide between God and science, or religion and spirituality and science. The problem didn't come in with the Bible. The Bible wasn't the problem. That's the trick. The Bible is, blaming the Bible is a trick that's used by people to deceive you, right? The Bible is the red herring. Remember Scooby-Doo, where they had the red herring? Not the original Scooby-Doo, but like the children's Scooby-Doo. I don't know if y'all remember that version. Like the children's Scooby-Doo, they would have the red herring, the kid with the red hair. They blamed everything on. That was the Bible. That was the Bible play, right? The problem was the Germans. The problem wasn't the Jews. The problem wasn't the Bible. The problem was the Germans, right? The Romans, right? The Romans are the Germans, just in case you don't know, right? Yeah, and the Greeks are not exactly the Germans. It gets crazy when you get back into the history and trying to figure out who's who, right? Then we just say white folks, and then we sound just as ignorant as white folks saying black folks, right? So, euphemistically, sometimes we can use those terms, but sometimes you need more specificity so folks know what you're talking about, right? But the problem was the Germans, and the Germans came in with a lot of concepts, and they wore the mask of Greece, right? Because Greece kind of took the keys of Kemet, or was handed the keys of Kemet. However we want to look at that coin, there's a heads and tail side to both, right? But we know Alexander the Great didn't conquer Kemet by force. He kind of beguiled it, with a little strong arm to it, right? And so he got the keys, and then Rome kind of did, took over. Rome took over, but they took over from Greece. And they kind of kept up the facade. So that's why the New Testament is Greek, right? It could have been Italian or Latin, but it's Greek, right? So that's a trick. The problem, the divide is and the Vatican pushed the issue, right? The Vatican pushed the issue. The Vatican became, the Inquisition, later on slavery, the witch hunts, the Moorish persecution, and all of those things were Vatican centered, but we don't really put a face or nationality or group of people behind the Vatican. We allow them to stay anonymous, right? And so, it was really the Germans and the German concept that came in of God, right? So when the German concept of God comes in, right, that's where the split between science and spirituality and all those other things comes in. Because once the German concept of God comes in and replaces the ancient concepts of God, which, is more like energy and, universal laws and universal constants, right? You could replace, some of the natures with universal constants and be more correct than, like the fat white guy that lives in the clouds. Like once the fat white guy that lives in the clouds came in, now you have a obvious divide between science and spirituality, because anybody with half a brain is like, there's no such thing as a fat white guy that lives in the clouds, right? Even if the pro-black folks want to come in and say, no, he's black. No, there's no fat black guy that lives in the clouds. Like there's no slim guy living in the clouds either. Like there's not a fat older one with a slim younger one that lives in the clouds. Like that's not black, white, brown, yellow. That's not a thing. Right. So boom, obvious divide. And then the finger pointing. Right? Because the people that are like, yo, if you can't see that that's stupid, right? I don't know. So you get some of the most craziest, ruthless, bloodiest wars fought over, like in the name of religion or in the name of the Bible, but really it's not. Really, it's just about this one German concept that they pushed on to folks with the purpose of creating, a inseparable divide, so they can, sit behind the, laugh all the way to the bank kind of vibe, keep the folks divided, and so smart folks decided to, set up some systems around that system and profiteer, loan some folks some money here and there and, profiteer. So, people feel a way about that, but the divide, the real crazy divide is really just was that concept of the word God, so we really just got to get that out there in the open. Like that's like a deep, dark family secret where the family can't be whole until we get that out in the open. Like, no, the problem isn't really the Bible. The problem is really just this one little thing. And this one thing has tentacles all over the place. Because if you believe that in order to believe in the validity of the Bible, you have to also believe in this concept of everything goes downhill, right? But the Bible is, all religions, all science, all everything is dealing with, prediction, because that's the state of human. That's the that's human nature. Prediction is security. Security is prediction. So there's no There's no security without prediction. Just on any level. Everything is based on prediction and probability. It is literally the most important and under-discussed science or system of mathematics that there is. And it's at the forefront of Kemetic cosmology. The forefront of Kemetic cosmology. Once you add Maa.T into the equation, because Maa.T is order and sequence. Order and sequence implies pattern. Pattern implies predictability, right? Pattern implies circuits, cycles, right? And so you take cycle, you're looking at living circuits, right? You go on a microscopic scale, circuits are life, right? Because you don't have electricity, right? If we just take it to that level, there's no biology without patterns of energy flow, right? Patterns of energy flow, right? There's no intelligence without pattern recognition and then the ability to store those patterns. Pattern recognition and the ability to store those patterns. Those are the two basic functions of what we call our mind, right? To be able to recognize something and then remember it so we know it when we see it again. And the purpose of knowing it when we see it again is so we know how to respond in a given situation. And then our body and our brain is kind of designed around that, right? We have fight or flight. We have humor, right? So we have two things on the opposite spectrum. We have humor and we have fight or flight. Both of those things are based on the ability to act in prediction, right? Humor is to be able to allow us to predict. Fight or flight is for us to act in the face of crazy odds. Yeah, crazy odds. We need to get strong and we need to get fast. Yeah. So, you get the example of if a lion hop out while you're in the jungle, but we no longer walk around in jungles with lions. So now it's, if you outnumbered 5-1 somewhere or whatever the case may be, right? You need to be able to, or if you're a mom and your baby, is trapped under a car. I don't know how probable that situation is, but we get that example all the time. Oh yeah, the mom whose baby was trapped under a car, she got strong, and so yeah, there's that, right? But humor, the reason for humor is so that we could think things through that are painful, that would otherwise, based on how our neurochemistry works, block us from being able to continue to think and process information. We have humor to be able to go through it. This is why you have like white humor and black humor, right? Everybody shares humor, right? But typically commercial humor is broken up into white humor and black humor. Black humor is more situational based, right? Because the struggle is real, right? White humor is more like, is broken up between slapstick and like self-deprecation, right? So there's a lot more self-deprecation because slapstick is kind of like, but you get some people in movies that'll bring the slapstick back. But in terms of stand-up, you get a lot more self-deprecation. So if you don't know what self-deprecation is, that's basically like what Eminem did in 8 Mile. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody thought Eminem was a genius for what he did in 8 Mile, but no, he was borrowing an already existing. Yeah, I'm gonna just diss myself. I'm gonna diss that's self-deprecation when you diss yourself. You know what I'm saying? You violate yourself. You just make jokes about yourself, right? Some people use that as their whole set. some people use that as a doorway so that they could start talking crazy and reckless about you. Like they'll just lighten the mood and talk, crazy about themselves, get everybody to drop their guard, and then they'll start moving through the audience. And, where black comedians typically, it's like more like jokes about the struggle, family, relationships, you know what I'm saying? And everybody does a little of everything. Right? Black comedians do self-deprecation, slapstick. Like Richard Pryor was famous for both self-deprecation and slapstick. Right? His situational comedy wasn't even that funny. I mean, I ain't gonna say it wasn't that funny, but that wasn't what he was the king of comedy for. He was the king of comedy for self-deprecation, talking about himself, his cocaine habits and gay situations and just wild situations in Hollywood. And, in the movies he did, slapstick, you know what I'm saying? So Eddie Murphy was kind of the GOAT for, situational comedy, talking about his parents, drunk uncle, his father, and then Kevin Hart, and then kind of come off of the Eddie Murphy line. My point though is prediction, probability is everything. It's everything. It's everything. It's everywhere you look. That's what it is. Right. So I guess I've been beating around the bush. I thought, I'm gonna be honest, I thought I had been having this conversation. But, like I said at the beginning of the video, y'all got that book. That's an old book, you know what I'm saying? But research everything in it before you go crazy. As time passes, you learn more. And I'm constantly, I'm still learning. I'm sharing what I'm learning in real time, but I'm still, I'm still a student. I'm going to be a student until I take my last breath and transition. Then I'm going to start all over from scratch in student mode at the next level. But, that's what the, even with, my first lecture, I can't say my first lecture, my second lecture in Detroit. That's literally what these are the variables that eventually wind up having me to moving to Detroit. But my first lecture in Detroit was crazy, and I didn't intend it to be. I came and I did a lecture on the periodic table. And it was so crazy. Years later, Dr. Ayibo told me it was one of his favorite lectures to watch on the internet. You know what I'm saying? That was crazy for me. Dr. Ayibo is an international, world-renowned genius. He was like, oh, no, this is one of the favorite. I love this. I watch this all the time. I'm like, what? No. The one I did. He was like, yeah, I know who you are. Yeah, that still messes me up when I think about it. I had a few scenarios where folks that I thought would be beyond paying me any attention was like, nah, are you kidding? I watch you. Yeah. Yep. I remember when Baba Kalindi bought a ticket to come to my lecture. My man paid, got a seat, and sat down and was in the lecture, like actively in the lecture, writing stuff down. I was like, the whole time I'm bothered. I'm like, yo, what is he doing in my lecture? But yeah, so I did this lecture on the periodic table. And I only did that lecture on the periodic table because I wanted to get into my I King lecture. I wanted to get into my I King bag, right? Because at the time I had the very first I King book, which, I was gambling on, pun intended, because the book had more pictures than words. So I thought I was doing something, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo, yeah, it came with the picture language, you know what I'm saying? I'm about to do a whole book, like it didn't really, people's minds were too all over the place. right? But at that time, you know what I'm saying, I was using the I King. And I always say I King, and then somebody always comes along, or at least like 100 people come along, like, no, it's the the I Ching. I'm like, I haven't heard no Chinese people. I haven't heard any Chinese people say I Ching. That's a serious misprint. This is either I Jing or I King. That's all of the like the Chinese people that I've spoken to on the subject. They either say I Jing or I King or I King. So, you know, for me, knowing the roots, you know, going back to the Yellow River arrangement and, you know, the Yellow River, you know, the first people at in the Yellow River settlements. I'm like, no, this, yeah, I think the I King is more apropos, right? But my point in this conversation is to try to create some cohesion for people that may not understand why this book. I think it's right here on the screen. Yeah, it's right here on my screen. So I don't know if it's right there on your screen, but it's right here on my screen. Right? But like, why is it in the middle of the Ebers Papyrus book and we going through the herbs and the medicines? Like, what is it doing there? Right? For me, it doesn't make sense to go through herbs and have a comparative, you know, like analysis on medicine or modern ancient verse moderns. If there's no conversation of thought process or application. So this is why this kind of resurfaces every so often for me. And I feel like we need to go into this conversation, but I try to make it more lifelike and realistic, right? So with the I King book, what I did in that book was I wanted to relate geometry and number and frequency, right? And I think I kind of did it in the new book, you know. Yeah, I try to be a little more coherent, you know, every time around. every time I try to present the subject, you know, but just leaning on, really just leaning on, like touching on some of the history of it and the divination, but kind of just leaning on like the fact that this is health thought. This is holistic thinking. This is medical thinking. This is the ground that holistic healers, naturopaths, medical doctors, surgeons, like this is where, you know, whether or not they all know it, this is the even playing field. This is where everybody can unite. This is where the fake beef, you know, the fake beef between doctors and naturopaths, you know, because really, to be honest, holistic healers and naturopaths can't win the opinion war that is going on in the public for, you know, people, the real estate of people's minds, right? And the reason why is because the medical establishment has the money, right? You're not going to beat big pharma in an opinion game because they own media, right? So they can just start editing social media platforms and you know, which they've done, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, you can't win that. But in the fact place, right, there's no expiration date on truth, right? There's no expiration date on truth. Truth doesn't go sour. Truth is just the truth. It's a universal law. It's universal law, right? And so the whole entire concept is probability. It's probability. You know, academia focuses in on, they put the hyper focus on the weaknesses of holistic practice, naturopathic practice. You know, they highlight this and that and the other, you know, and while hiding their weaknesses, you know what I'm saying? But people can look up iotropic death. You know, that's one of the largest causes of death in America, around the world. Iotropic death is death by doctor mistakes or death by, you know, something caused with the hospital. You know, and that number doesn't even account for the people that die, you know, like in surgery from a doctor mistake. That's not considered a blatant mistake, because a lot of the mistakes don't make it to, when it comes to the paperwork, they're not written up as mistakes. A lot of mistakes will be written up as patient didn't make it through the surgery. But really, you know, a surgeon, a young resident or intern might have cut too deeply, or just made a mistake, or been up too many hours, or, you know, human error. Human error is factored in, pun intended, this math is factored in as a part of what's acceptable. The same way police now. So for instance, over the last X amount of years, I guess since Rodney King, right? Since Rodney King, you know, police have come under a microscope. But before cell phones and cameras was everywhere, y'all think police brutality is at an all-time high right now. Like, because y'all watching so much stuff on social media. They got to stop watching all that on social media. Like, y'all are hyper tuned into certain stuff, and the social media will keep feeding it to you. So you keep seeing all these traffic stops and all this craziness. Like, no, the world is getting better. It's improving a lot. Before there were cameras, before there was even lights everywhere, because the world before, forget about the cameras, because they had to put more lights everywhere to facilitate the cameras. But I grew up in New York City when it was dark. It was dark. It wasn't street lights everywhere, and it definitely wasn't no cameras anywhere. Woo! It was God and police. And sometimes the police was confused about whether there was God. Judge, jury, executioner, all in one. Police was that on the spot, right? But now there's cameras, and now they're forced to wear body cameras, right? So a lot more things are still happening, but there's a lot more, you know, ability for transparency. There's a lot more that you can see. You know, they can turn off the cameras, they can put the cameras on mute, and they can still, you know, it's still wiggle room, but there's a lot more transparency. You know, there's cameras in places, there's people in windows, there's a lot more transparency. But there's no transparency in an operating room. Nobody knows what happens in there. And definitely Cancun rules apply. What happens in Cancun stays in Cancun. Yeah. So there's nobody in there watching. You know what I'm saying? Except for the people that's in there rocking together. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, you cover my mistakes, I cover your mistakes. You know what I'm saying? So probability, right? Probability. That's why you have to really understand probability. You have to understand probability. You know, I'll be the first one to say surgeons are needed more than anything else in the world. You know what I'm saying? But I don't put, you know, and maybe when I was young in my 20s, I would have been like a voice against the medical system. But having went through what I went through with Amber, having met Dr. Lee, and that situation with Amber could have went totally different. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was like 90% the cause, you know, outside of God, of course, for what happened. But if Dr. Lee wasn't a real one, you know, if he wasn't a real one, it could have went a whole different way. you know, because I was totally disruptive. And thinking back on how that went down, I was totally out of pocket. I was totally out of pocket, but I was just I was so much more in love with my daughter than worried about anything else. You know, locked me up. You know, we had a lawsuit on the nurse that cracked, you know, like her insurance or whatever. I didn't care about any money, whether I got locked. I didn't care about anything but just getting Amber back. You know what I'm saying? Because there was children in the ICU that had less. That was one of the worst things because probability. The math is going through my mind. I'm in the ICU. I didn't leave the ICU. The whole time she was in ICU, I was in ICU. I didn't go home. I didn't change. I stayed there. I was doing little bird showers in the bathroom. I stayed in the ICU. I slept right there in the chair on the window. Like I stayed there the whole time. And there was children that had less, like they were doing better than Amber was. And they were dying in the ICU. It was children that died in the ICU. Like that was tough for me. I'm empathic by, you know, like I'm an empath. That was rough for me. You know what I'm saying? To see children in there that had a higher probability of success. They had the doctors were giving them higher chances of survival than Amber, and they was passing away. So my mind was really like, I had to stay focused on the program. You know what I'm saying? Like, and just, you know, the saying, you know, control what you can control. You can't control things that's out of your control, right? You can't change all the variables, right? The only thing you can do is change the variables that you can control, you know, and, you know, Jesus take the wheel kind of vibe. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you got to control what you can control. And that's what I was on the scene for. Every single variable, every variable that I could control, I was in control of, period. I want to know what's in the IV bags, everything. What's in the IV bag? What other types of IV bags you got? Well, why are we using this kind if y'all got that kind? You know, I'm all over them. I'm all over them with the IV bags. Then once the IV bags is done, we on food. Nah, we're not eating this. Why would she drink that? Nah, don't even bring this tray. Don't even try to temptation my child. Like, nah. Give that to somebody else who hungry. They want seconds or whatever. Like, nah, don't bring that tray here. Don't even bring that down. We good. Yeah, we good. Man, stop taking so much blood. Like I was just on everything, every variable, right? To give her the best opportunity for the body to do its magic, right? Because I first learned about probability in terms of healing when I was young, maybe 6 years old or something like that, 7 years old. My first little girlfriend, she was a thick one. She was a thick one. Tanisha from down the hallway. And my mom and her mom were best friends. And her mom eventually got cancer. My mom kept telling me it was diarrhea, but Miss Phyllis, may she rest in greatness. But one day we sitting outside, you know, my mom and Phyllis, they doing what they doing. I guess they drinking beer, talking, you know, making jokes or whatever. We sitting in front of the building. Me and Tanisha, we playing bumper cars on the sliding board, but just one-on-one. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, we slide. I don't know if y'all know about bumper cars, but basically somebody slide and then you slide down as hard as you can to try to bump them off the slide onto the floor. And so it was all good until one time she bumped me off the slide and then she fell onto my arm. Crack. I started crying. I went over to my mom. My mom was a thug. She said, "That's what you get. Now go sit your ass down until I'm ready to go upstairs. So I had to go upstairs with a broken arm, go to bed that night, broken arm. I'm crying. She's like, boy, you better lay down and take your behind to sleep. Ain't nobody told you to. Ain't nobody told you to. So then in the morning, I woke up still crying, in more pain than I was the night before. She finally took me to the doctor. So we get to the hospital, and I don't know, my mind always been curious, scientifically, inclined, I guess. So curiosity. So we get to the hospital. I'm asking a lot of questions, and I'm expecting them to do something to fix my arm. Right. But they didn't do anything. You know what I'm saying? They gave me some children painkillers, and they put me in a cast. I got a cast. And they was like, no, your arm, is going to heal itself, unless there's something wrong, but chances are your arm just going to heal itself. We just put the cast on it so that way we try to eliminate any chances, right? The lingo, right? We hear the lingo of probability divination all the time. We just don't know what we're hearing, right? We just want to eliminate any chances of, you re-injuring it or you moving it out of alignment because it got to be set, how the bone, like it was a clean break. So he was like, no, we're just going to set it back the way it's supposed to be. And then, put the cast on it and, it heals itself. So like, wait, the doctors, you don't heal it? It's not going to be healed when I leave right now? Like I can't go back to playing? They was like, nah, we're going to set it. It's still going to be broken for some weeks, but we're going to put it in a cast, and the cast is going to be, protected so it doesn't get injured or move around or whatever the case. But no, your body heals itself. So my little mind is already like, okay, let me cook. Probability, right? Probability. Not only was I learning early on, getting, little jewels about probability, but your body heals itself. Okay. Body heals itself. So stuff like that starting to sink in early. The body heals itself. Within reason, of course, right? And the within reason part is where variables come in. That's where variables come in. That's why I've always been like, when it comes to medicine or herbs, pick your poison. It depends on what your life is. It depends on what's going on with you. People say, oh, yeah, well, herbs have a lot less dangerous side effects. That's a fact. But there's a reason, because they're a lot less potent. They're a lot less potent. They're a lot less strong. The medicine has more stronger side effects because the medicine acts a lot quicker. So if you go the holistic route, chances are you can still get healed, but it's just going to take you longer than medicine. So it's a gamble. You're throwing the dice, right? You want to go the safe route, play it safe, less risk, less reward. You want to go the medical route, more risk, more reward, right? That's the other part to understanding that most medicines are extracted from plants, right? So if you have a plant and you look at 100% of the plant matter, right? There's 100,000 compounds inside a plant, right? Those compounds all act together in unison when you take the herb, right? They're all acting, right? So the change is gradual. whatever you're looking at happening, whether you're speeding up enzymes or slowing them down, right? Whereas if you isolate one compound from out of the plant, you isolate one compound and you just take that at the same scale, it's going to act a lot faster. And because of that, you may have a lot larger domino effect, because everything in your body is related, which is largely the problem over the years, which is the reason why I'm co-signing RFK, right? Is because our bodies are different. And because our bodies are different, right? Because our bodies are different, what we need has to be different. It can't be one size fits all. That's just insanity. That's insanity. That's the new insanity that we've been under the last few hundred years. The same as, you know, a fat guy and a skinny guy living in the clouds. Like that's it just doesn't work that way. It doesn't even work amongst people that actually fit the standard model of what a man or woman should be, right? It doesn't even fit in that space. Even in that space, if you have 100 people identical, you know, within reason, you're still going to have some 70-30, 60-40, 80-20 splits where you're going to have adverse reactions in some population of that number, even of the ideal folks. You know what I'm saying? So we got to start thinking that way. Like, even if we talk about push-ups, there's adverse reactions to push-ups. There's adverse reactions to exercise. Like, some folks can't exercise. You know what I'm saying? Over the years, I've met folks that were allergic to certain fruits and vegetables. Like, so you can't even be like, yo, fruits and vegetables for everybody. Like, it really doesn't matter what it is. You're dealing with probability and statistics, right? So this is why the most important thing for you to do is to study yourself. Study yourself and then study health in general. Right? That's the most important thing we're supposed to be doing out here. Right? Learning yourself. Forget man, heal thyself. You know what I'm saying? The heal thyself thing. That's not it. Learn thyself should be the slogan, right? Because you can't heal thyself if you don't learn thyself. And you can't try to heal thyself or learn thyself at the last minute. Yeah, it doesn't work at the last minute. It's too late. you had stage 3 cancer and you trying to figure out, you know, anti-cancer foods. Like, you going to get you a salad, bruh. Bruh, you done had 30 years of Chinese food and you know, cheese sticks and beef jerkies and you know, 6 packs of 50 malt liquor beers and all kinds of craziness. You know what I'm saying? Just all kinds of craziness. And now you're getting ready to try to blitz yourself, you know, with ballerina tea and green salad and you know, at the last minute. You know, you got to figure this thing out. You know what I'm saying? We got to figure this thing out. And the real thing is, it's like the people that built the pyramid. You know, they wasn't really necessarily just building the pyramid for themselves. You know, it was for future generations. You know, so a part of what we're doing is for us, so we can maximize this window of longevity. But a part of what we're doing has to be for the babies, has to be for the next generations. It has to be so that we're not starting over with wealth, you know, or confused by what wealth is. You know what I'm saying? Because wealth is not houses and real estate. Wealth is genetics. Wealth is longevity. Wealth is health. And, you know, it's always been like a pleasure. It's always been like a pleasure in the hood, Black communities, Spanish communities, like minority communities, to be able to laugh at, you know, trust fund babies that turn into cokeheads and mess up the family fortune. You know what I'm saying? They start turning into cokeheads and pill poppers, and they get into the deviant culture, and they just ruin the whole family fortune. And, you know, we fantasize about, man, if I had this amount, I'd have did this. Man, somebody give me this, I'm gonna just open up 15 laundromats, and I'm gonna, you know, all kind of ideas, right? But the whole time we're not realizing that we're doing the same thing with our physical. Like, our ancestors left us inheritances as well. You got an inheritance as well. You might not have got you a car. But you don't have nobody in your family that was born with 6 fingers and 7 toes and 3 ears. Yeah. You don't realize the inheritance you got because you got it. The same way they don't realize the inheritance they got because they got it. It was already there when you came into the world. It was right there with oxygen and water. Oxygen and water right there, but you don't appreciate the fact that you have oxygen and water. The whole process, the whole purpose of even investing the money in Watson Crick and trying to figure out DNA, mapping the genome, $1 billion project. Predictability, probability, divination, to be able to predict the future, supernatural events, using supernatural, predicting the future by supernatural means. That's probability and statistics, predicting the future by supernatural means. The only trick is, over the years, the definition of what supernatural is constantly changes. Because supernatural is the scientific word for magic. So over the years, the definition of what supernatural is changes. Not the divination, the definition of supernatural, that changes. Yeah. So there's one time when the stars, the sun, the moon, and the stars, supernatural. Supernatural. Now it's astronomy. And they've separated the supernatural aspect of the sun, moon, and the stars, or the planets, you know, studying the cosmos. They've separated that into astrology and astronomy. So that way they can give you the impression that one is not the other, but it's the same. It's not really a difference. It's just the use of it. It's heads and tails. Yeah. Astronomy is studying the planets, the stars, etc. And then all you got to do is ask, what's the purpose of that? The moment you ask, what's the purpose of that? And the door opens right up for divination and astrology. What's the purpose of that? What are we studying that for? Oh, so we can learn about our place in the cosmos. Why? Why? So we can maximize our potential. How do we do that? By observing patterns, by observing the effects of the planetary bodies of the stars and blah, 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 blah on us, and being able to minimize the downsides and capitalize on, you know, the opportunities that present themselves. The more we learn, right? So, you know, it's probability and you know, it's probability and statistics, pattern recognition, right? And so you can't really understand what you're doing health-wise, any type of thing, really. But, you know, sports, what But health wise, I'm gonna keep mentioning that this is, this is everything. It's probability and prediction, but it comes back to, so I want you to get this concept that, genetic memory. So when you see like the jewelry, we like to wear our jewelry, that's just genetic memory. That's genetic memory. When they go into the tombs of the pharaohs, it's lit. It's lit. You know what I'm saying? When you a young man and you in the neighborhood, when you a young man and you in the neighborhood and you see the brothers playing dice. You see the brothers playing dice. Something lures you to that. Yeah, something lures you to that. It's magical. On the West Coast, they use 2 dice. They play craps. On the East Coast, we play CeeLo. We use 3 dice. But it's magical. We get lured to the dice. You start playing dice before you learn that, like you get this is illegal gambling. This is illegal gambling. You don't even know it's illegal gambling until you get a little older. You just playing dice. You know what I'm saying? Like dice comes on board games. You see dice, then pretty soon, you get a little older. Fellas playing dice for all kinds of things: push-ups, dollar, sandwich, lunch. Then you get a few more dollars. The bets start getting a little crazier, right? You don't even learn the fact that, the first dice was discovered in Kemet. The first dice, craps, CeeLo, dice comes from Kemet. Yeah, dice comes from Kemet. It's genetic memory. Now, what was they doing with the dice, right? What were they doing with the dice, right? Because anything you do with the dice can be reduced to the profanest definition and just say, oh, it's gambling, right? And gambling is going to pop up. You know what I'm saying? It's human nature. Yeah, I bet I beat you in running. I bet I get to the tree before you. I bet you I could catch some food before you do. I bet you I grow more crops than you. That's just, who grows the best crops? Who's the best farmer? Who's the best? Like, that's natural competition, right? But yeah, probability. The dice come from Kemet. So that's genetic memory. You automatically just attracted to something. You don't know where the attraction came from. You got genetic memory that attract you to them dice. Yeah. So on one hand, dice is a tool invented for probability. Right? Dice is a tool invented for probability. This is why, you have all kinds of dice out there. I've seen 3-sided dice, 8-sided dice, 10-sided dice, but typically dice is 6-sided. Typically dice is 6-sided, right? And so you have to understand, when you get into a dice having 6 sides, right? There's a reason for that. Like the one that caught on, like everybody's using this, the dice with 6 sides. There's a reason that dice has 6 sides. There's a reason why, 666 is the number of man. You know what I'm saying? And then we get confused and the boogeyman pop in, and before you know it, we get microchips in our forehead and in our hand, and Illuminati, and the dragon is in the ocean, and it gets crazy. You lose sight of reality, right? But the number 6 The number 6 is closely in tune with your chemistry, astronomy. Yeah, your design, universal design, your design, like the number 6 is closely in tune with that, right? And it starts with literally cells. It literally starts with cells, right? It literally starts with cells, starts with water, right? The structure of water, right? Living water, the water in your cells, 6-sided, right? When you look at the pigment layout for the pigment at the back of your eye, it's in hexagon shapes. So the hexagon, the 6-sided shape, right? That trigonometry is based on, that your biology is based on, your cells are based on, not just humans, bumblebees, lions, tigers, bears, like all life, right? So you have this 6-sided thing, right? That's why, you know, the I King or the I Ching, you know, it's a good thing for you to play with and just to get an idea, you know, even if you don't, you don't believe in that kind of stuff or whatever, or you feel like it's superstition or it's just good to learn it as a system of math. You don't have to put any stock in it, but just to see how it works is good to play with, just to learn, you know, to understand the math, to learn probability, to learn possibility, to learn statistics, to learn cycles, right? Patterns, right? Why is it that, you know, there's so much variation within species, but then there are caps to the variation, right? Why? How does that work? When parents are passing down genetics, how does the genes? How do genes show differences, even though there's only like a small amount? You look at a family, everybody looks different, but you only got 2 sets of DNA, but it's changing every generation, you know, because you got dominant, recessive, and then you got all these variables. Right, just to have that understanding, to simplify it, you know, you simplify it that way, right? But that's the whole idea of the controversy behind the Star of David, right? The controversy behind the Star of David is, you know, King Solomon gets this wisdom, and there's no physical, tangible thing to account for this wisdom except for this seal of Solomon. But it's not really a biblical concept. So it's been controversial over the years, where you have some folks as serious hardcore Christians or Jews or whatever, Catholics, they believe in the Star of David. Some don't. You know, it's a heated subject, right? It doesn't make sense until you realize that the Bible is not biblical. Nothing in the Bible comes from the Bible, right? Nothing in the Bible comes from the Bible. The Bible is a repository of ancient, you know, wisdom, knowledge, right? So, you know, time would be better spent on figuring out what the knowledge is, right? Until you have the 6, right? The 6-sided, 6-pointed star. It's a hexagram, right? It's a hexagram. Hexagrams are hexagons, right? Just kind of different shape, but, you know, the shape has the frequency, right? And frequency, once you use the word frequency, you can use the word frequency to talk about, you know, music, right? You can use the word frequency to talk about music, sound, but you can also use the word frequency to discuss probability, right? If you take one dice, 6 numbers, 6-sided, you know, there's a 1 in 6 chance that it will land on any number. But if I roll the dice X amount of times, in order to create statistics, what I would be writing down if I write down each roll of the dice so I can create statistics, right? And get more exact, percentages on whatever the case may be. Well, then I would be counting the frequency of each time it landed on 1 or landed on 3 or landed on whatever, right? I'll be counting the frequency. So frequency is also repetition, right? Repetition is a pattern, right? Repetition is a pattern. So now we go from biology, right? And biochemistry, we go to mechanical waves, right? And electromagnetic waves, right? Which is the thing that combines with water to create life. That's literally the stuff life is made out of. Probability, statistics, right? We literally measure mechanical waves and electromagnetic waves based on repetition, right? The size of a wave. UV is really short. So that means the wave repeats really fast because the waves are really small. And the smaller they are, the more powerful they are. The more they have the ability to alter your biochemistry, right? So when you get to real small, you can get cancer production quickly. Once you get the UVC, you start to get into a cancer space. UVC is super destructive. It don't matter how much melanin you think you got. UVC gets destructive, right? Then you stretch it all the way out. You get long waves, right? Infrared, radio waves. These are long waves. They're not so destructive. They're beneficial, right? Beneficial. Infrared, is heat, right? Infrared waves stimulates melatonin. So your body converts infrared into antioxidant protection, right? And then all the way from that space between infrared, all the way up through the visible spectrum, all the way to UVB is where your biochemistry is. So there's a reason why the visible part of the spectrum is the visible part of the spectrum. It's because it's not that it's visible like you see with your eyes, but it interacts with your type of cells, earth cells, right? So from just outside of the visible spectrum on one side, all the way through from infrared to UVB and everything in between, each part of that has an impact on your biochemistry. How does it do that? Because we go down the same thing. We can take it down to the periodic table, which is what I was saying anyway. Started the conversation with my first lecture in Detroit, the periodic table, right? Talking about, and this just from the hearing 120 repeated over and over, repeated frequency, right? Pun intended. But just being from the neighborhood, the gods, 120, 120, 120. For me, trying to figure out what 120 was, right? Because I didn't have anybody directly. When I start hearing that, I didn't have somebody upstairs to tell me what 120 was, right? But it was in the street. It was in the neighborhood. It was in the music, right? So I go, the gods is like, yo, this is the science. So I go to school with it. I go to school with it. I'm looking for the science in science books, right? And the only place I can find 120 is in the periodic table. So that's where my fascination with the periodic table came from. The gods in the street saying 120, 120, 120. Because when you start with hydrogen and you move up through all of the different atoms, each different atom has more electrons associated with it. And then there's a point where you get into hypothetical or laboratory created atoms. And there's a limit to how many electrons an atom can even possibly hold, where they can't even hypothesize or synthetically create any more atoms. And that limit is 120. So as a youth, that's what my mindset went with the 120, right? But each atom in and of itself is distinguished by frequency, right? And the way light interacts with atoms is because light when an atom, when the electrons around the atom come in contact with a photon, they start moving and vibrating like guitar strings or piano strings. And they absorb the photon like force and re-radiate out the photon like music. So each atom has its own individual distinction based on its spectra or frequency. You know, it's sound, it's music, right? So that was my first introduction really to the periodic table. And then I always saw everything through that lens. Like, okay, so each atom, because it has different electrons and whoop, 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 it has its own different, you know, set of qualities. And when they come together, those qualities are built into the compound or the molecule that's created by adding atoms together, right? And so you measure the probability of what a compound or a molecule can do based on, you know, this is chemistry. You're putting stuff together in a lab based on individual qualities, and you're saying, you're calculating, predicting, educated guessing, right? All of these things, probability, divination, right? You're saying, okay, these qualities are here. If I put these with this, it should have this, right? And then you follow that logic all the way up to GMOs, right? They're like, oh, well, this vegetable does this and this does that. So if I want a vegetable that doesn't go bad, I need to add, you know, we'll splice this, right? But now the way waves work is electromagnetic waves, right? Photons, they change the speed, right? Because everything, you know, we can get lost in the energy conversation, or we could simplify it to potential and kinetic energy, right? And so electrons have a potential energy and a kinetic energy depending on where they are, right? And you can't know both, how fast they are, where they are, and all this other, you know, theory of uncertainty, right? So there's always the theory of uncertainty surrounding the activity of an electron, right? So again, when you add theory of uncertainty to the root of all chemistry, electron behavior, that means all of science that's built on the periodic table is built on probability, because at the root of understanding the behavior of an atom is uncertainty, right? But what we know certainly is that a photon, depending on what speed it's moving at, right, the size of its waves, right, is going to impact the potential energy or the kinetic energy of an electron, right? And that's how biochemistry happens, right? Because you have an electron, you cause electron movement by adding energy in, right? Light. And so depending on the electron, you know, configuration, if you will, right? Certain types of light produces certain types of effects, right? And those effects affect us all differently depending on our composition, right? Now probability comes back in, right? How much melanin you got? Is that sunlight going to make vitamin D, or is it going to give you melanoma? Right? What are we doing? Right? Probability. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm getting lost in the source of the conversation, but my point is, right, it's variables. My point is variables. So we always got to kind of have that in mind, that we're talking about variable. I've been talking for a long time. Okay, not that long, 90 minutes. But we're talking about variables when we're talking about, you know, health. We're talking about variables when we're talking about longevity, you know. And so It's one thing to understand the concept, but then you don't understand the language. You know, when you go see a doctor, when you go to the hospital, right? Because people playing on the internet, people selling herbs and stuff on the internet, you know, people running around, yeah, eat coffee, you know, coffee mushroom, shiitake mushroom. This is gonna, you know, apple cider vinegar, right? Kombucha, drink kombucha, right? You know, like, but in the real world, you know, in the real world, people got to go to the hospital. People got to go see doctors. And most doctors hate holistic practitioners. And not because they themselves don't understand or practice holistic science at home. It's because 99% of what's on the internet is gobbledygook. And you can tell it's gobbledygook because the people presenting it don't understand. They don't speak anatomy. They don't speak body. Like, body language is a real language. So when you're saying all these, throwing these health concepts around, you know, like that dude that was saying, you know, veins and arteries are the same thing. And, you know, we eat food in the mitochondria and all kinds of crazy. To John Q. Public that doesn't know any better, it sounds like he know what he's talking about. And that's the problem. Somebody that spent 12 years studying, you know, whether they studied in school, holistically, naturopathically, you know, however, you spend a decade studying something, you get, you know, you get offended when you see people jump off the top rope pretending. You know what I'm saying? Like, bro, you don't, you know, those ain't Rolex diamonds. What the, you done to that? You know, you hit them with the hose. Like, yo, those ain't Rolex diamonds. What you done to that? Yeah, that ain't this. That ain't this. What is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, oh yeah, chakras is spirituality. Nah. First of all, what y'all talking about is not even chakras. Number one. Let's go back to the Upanishads. That what y'all talking about is chakras is not this. This in the Upanishads, they're talking about chakras. What y'all are talking about is some sexually deviant, psilocybin, mushroom-driven foolishness. I don't know what y'all talking about. Yeah, that's not that. Number two, what they talk about in Upanishads, chakras, this ain't even spirituality. It's in a spiritual text. It's not actually spirituality. It was a preparatory system to prepare you to get into some real high-level spirituality. Yeah, it was like training wheels. Yeah, they developed the chakras is like a training wheel system for you to get into spirituality, for you to understand some things. But no, that's not that. So we got to understand, you know, especially now it's getting springtime, right? I done had my little micro fracture on my leg. I've been looking in the mirror at myself, disgusted. Like, bro, how did you get fat in no time flat? But I guess if I didn't have my own eating issues, yeah, I wouldn't even have a Dr. EnQi or Minister EnQi first and then Dr. EnQi. But yeah, I wouldn't be here having these conversations with y'all at all. Because, yeah, I had to first start fighting my own battles. You know what I'm saying? Trying to get me together. That's what the story we started off with. I was talking about Desmond. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't trying to learn to be like a teacher or share no information with anybody. I was trying to figure out stuff for me. I was trying to figure out the best possibilities and probabilities for me. That's why when I first started, the very first time you hear me speaking on being a vegan, I'm like, no, I'm not vegan. I don't care about saving no animals. We're not doing PETA. Nah. We don't even have enough money to keep the light. Like I'm not thinking about saving no animals. Are you kidding? Where I come from, we are endangered species. Yeah. Where I come from, we are an endangered species. You can't get into philanthropy. That's why philanthropy is for rich folks. It's not that you have to be rich to practice giving. It's just that until you taking care of yourself, you can't even think about the next person. So you don't have to be rich to get into philanthropy, giving and sharing. You know what I'm saying? It's just nature, the way it's designed. You know what I'm saying? You got to make sure you straight. You can't share. You ain't got no dinners to feed the homeless if you going 2-3 days of the week without dinner yourself. Like you got to figure out, walk, crawl, walk, run. So I'm like, no. I'm not concerned with cows and lions and deers, and cows and lions and deers. They got to figure out what they figuring out. They got to get that thing together. Right. But then there's a point where you learn more, right? You do learn more. You do become a little bit more evolved in the subject or understanding. And then it's the same like the body. When you first start learning, you learn in individual systems, and then you get to a certain place where you see all the systems connected. Same thing happens outside your body. First, you're trying to get you together, and then you concerned with you. You're like, oh, well, this and that, and I only want to eat this, and why we don't have food like this around in supermarkets. Woo, woo, woo. And so I used to tell people, just be a little bit more selfish, and you'll figure out. If you go a little bit deeper into yourself, you'll come out the other end and you'll start thinking about everybody else, because you can't do one without the other, right? Because if you start just focusing on you, you're going to start asking them questions like, man, I live in the food desert. How come the supermarkets only have this and blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to wind up at government subsidizing this type of food and that type of food. And then you start asking those questions, and then boom, you having an agricultural conversation. As soon as you start having an agricultural conversation, and government subsidizing and prices and zoning and all that, now you're having a political conversation. And now you're like, well, how do we fix this? No, we got to change this. Why do they keep doing this and this? Yeah, because you said F the voting, and I'm black. I ain't just for white folks, and the electoral college and all kinds of excuses you done made up to flag off the voting, because that's not about you. That's about. So now you done went through that's what that's about. Oh yeah, so I got to start looking into that. Let me figure out some of that. Let me read up on some of that there. Where they got them books, right? Let me figure out some of that there. What is that? What is this thing here? So what is this? Local, what is this? What? Now you got to have those conversations, right? Or you might go in a different direction with it, right? You might be thinking about your health, and you're like, well, you get past, the basics, and you start expanding, and you want to improve everything, and you start talking about water quality, right? You get into the whole alkaline universe, and you learn that's bogus, and you start getting into natural water sources and artesian and spring and rainwater and spring. You start getting to these conversations, and you get into air quality. Yeah, you start getting into those conversations, and all of a sudden you in the environment. You have an environmental conversation. And once you start having an environmental conversation, you start seeing the largest thing impact the environment is farm animals. So you go back, now you back to the farm, back to the agricultural conversation. And if you have ideas where you disagree with how things are run, you're back into politics. Right? And if you in the politics conversation, you're having a banking conversation, a money conversation, an entrepreneur conversation. And, before long, no matter where you start, you end up in the same place. We all we got, right? We together. We together. Everything that anybody does impacts everybody at some point, right? Everything that anybody does impacts everybody at some point. right? So probability statistics. Yeah, probability statistics. Cause and effect. Cause and effect is how patterns are created. Recognizing cause and effect is recognizing patterns. When this happens, this will be the result. If this happens over and over, this is a pattern or a season. Right? So being able to understand that, recognize that, isolate that, and harness that as a system is what you're trying to do. Right? And then you get into the specifics, right? Specifics of what's going on inside your body, each system, right? Biochemistry. And this is how when we watched the neurosurgeon the other day, these are some of the things that, like the neurosurgeon, and that, we're going to keep talking about that neurosurgeon, because that was powerful. Like he top school, top education, top hospital, right? And, he understands the probability part, but he ain't understand the statistics. He understands the probability part because he learned it in school, but he didn't understand the statistics because his education is so narrow, he can't account for all the variables. Yeah. If you only study the holistic perspective, right, your education is narrow. If you only go through medical school, your education is narrow. If you're a personal trainer or you like a nutritionist, your education is narrow. I have taken time to try to put myself in all of these different spaces as a student and study as much as I can with the limited resources, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I can see through the different lenses and get the different perspectives. So I could, not just make better equivocations, but be able to find all of the nexus points. You know what I'm saying? The meeting spots where people are arguing or debating something, but they're saying the same thing. They're just caught up because they're using different language, but they're really saying the same thing. Right? That happens in science. Right? That happens in science, especially once you find out that most 90% of the medicines, and it would be like 100%. It would be literally like 100% of medicine would be from plants, but there are certain things that are medicines that are not, they're just not, they're not like, you get things from bacteria, you get things from funguses, you have things that are from viruses, right? You have medicine that comes from viruses, funguses, and bacteria. Why? Because bacteria, funguses, and viruses live on your body and in your body. Some of them have negative impact. Some of them, they don't. Right? That's how you measure the intelligence of a microorganism. You measure the intelligence of a parasite by how fast it kills its host. Yeah, the faster a parasite kills its host, the dumber the parasite is. The dumber the parasite is, because the parasite needs the host to live. And when it kills the host, it dies off itself. Or at best, it goes into a dormant state again. It's like the bad guy in the cartoon or in the comic book. You know what I'm saying? Like, Thundercats. You know what I'm saying? They beat Mum-Ra. Mum-Ra goes back into a dormant state until somebody summons him up again. And then he's back to, take over the world or whatever the case may be. Or DC Comics, Superman find a way to put Lex Luthor in jail. And, he's only in jail until somebody breaks him out of jail again. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of what we dealing with microbes and parasites. right? You get them under control. Either, you put them in dormant state, they'll be back. Pattern recognition, they'll be back, right? So you had to prepare, right? The three little piggies, right? Did you spend your time and effort on having fun? So you got the straw house. The wolf is coming. The wolf coming is not optional. The wolf is coming. For sure, the wolf is coming. We know the wolf is coming. So did you play or did you work? Did you play or did you work? What was you doing out there? Right? Did you do a lot of playing and almost no work? Did you do a half and half, or did you just get to work? Right? Did you just get straight into preparation? Are you Noah? Right? The most prolific story of the Bible is probability, statistics. It's teaching you the lesson of probability and statistics. It never rained before. It never flooded. So the thing Noah was predicting, nobody could believe it because there were no statistics to validate his prediction. There were no statistics to say, oh yeah, that happened. So yeah, we should probably listen. I'm like, what are you doing? That boy must be drunk or high or both right now. What are you doing? Why are you building that? I'm not giving you my stuff. I'm not donating no money, no material, no time to this foolish project you got going on here. This is pure foolishness. Like, all right, I'm telling you. I'm going to tell you like a player told me. Cash rules everything around me. See, lyrically, can't see me. Cut it. Know the chick before you call yourself loving it. A nigga, doesn't it seem hard to you? Yeah. What are you going to do? All right. Probability. Right. And what happened? Like Wesley Snipes said, always bet on black. They didn't bet on, they lost that bet. When Noah said, this is the prediction, here's the steps to prepare for this eventuality, and nobody listened, they died from lack of knowledge. But not because they wasn't presented with the knowledge, because they ignored the knowledge when it was presented. That's the other part of Hosea 4 and 6. A lot of people read the Hosea 4 and 6, but it's the rest of the Hosea 4 and 6 that's important. The second part is more important than the first part. My people dying for lack of knowledge. That's almost obvious. That's almost self-evident. It's the second part. Yeah. Because you're rejecting knowledge when it's presented to you. What is knowledge? Knowledge is the statistics part. That's the statistics part. That's what my father taught me. This was reading was about. He's like, no. Don't waste your time reading nonfiction books. Because people spend their whole life studying something and then they write a book about it. So you could read a book and get like a whole lifetime worth of information in a few days or a couple weeks. I was like, ooh. He was like, yeah, you could just quadruple your intelligence past everybody else, because somebody that the world will consider a genius, well, he's going to put all his genius in a book. And then you could just go grab that book. Boop. Just boop. You could just add his whole lifetime worth of experience and knowledge and information right to yours like that. That's power. Predictability. That's why starting in the early 1920s and 30s, they figured out a way to unempower you. Yeah. Fake intelligence. Fake intelligence. fake intelligence. And now everybody's caught. Almost everybody. We like the little Noah's Ark folks, but yeah, mostly everybody. Chat GPT. Chat GPT. What should I get for dinner? Chat GPT. What he said about my mom. Chat GPT. What kind of girlfriend should I get? The machines do math for you. They read to you. They write for you. They process probability for you. They think for you. So you're safe with externalized knowledge. Or at least you think that way. You've been conditioned to externalize knowledge. You have to consume the knowledge, because the knowledge you consume becomes a part of your genetics. So that's the other piece when we get into the knowledge part. And I kind of been going too long with this intro, but that's the other piece to the knowledge part is after the whole DNA program, and they find out the limitations of genetic information, they realize there's another part to genetic information that's not stored in the DNA. It's not stored in the DNA. There's some other database that your cells that have access to, personal database of information that's not in the DNA. So that's where nutrigenomics science came from, nutrimoronics came from, right? The study of nutrition on your genome, the study of nutrition on mRNA, which kind of like the on and off switch for your different genes and all that kind of stuff, right? But still, there's information that's missing, or at least not accounted for in those systems, right? So, and then you're looking at traits being passed down, traditions, trades, interests. You walk just like your father. Like your mother might be looking at you walk across the room and be like, you walk just like your father. Or your father might look at you and be like, you smile just like your mother. Like there's information that's translated that we just take for granted. You got a family full of musicians. They're like, oh yeah, music running the family. Music genes. At least not in the traditional view of how DNA works, right? So where does this information come from? You know what I'm saying? The door got open with epigenetics, right? The door got open with epigenetics. Like, oh no, what you're doing right now is going to affect next generations, right? So this just tip of the iceberg though, because there's this biblical narrative, right? The sins of the father will be revisited on the children 3 generations deep or 7 generations deep, right? Then you have the Kemetic iteration, right? Which is the Shin, right? Where your information from your lifetime lives forever through your children and your children's children and your children's children, which is another way of wording what we understand about DNA. All right, it's almost time. That's what I'm talking about. That's crazy right there. Mike can't even watch the video. He just came to drop a super chat on us. He ain't even got time to watch the video. He just dropped a super chat on us. Let me see what's going on over here. King Simon tapping in. Oh, man, I definitely appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. Shout out to King Simon for the love. That's a different type of super chat. That's a different type of super chat. When he said, yo, go check out EnQi, that's a super chat. He chatting on a super level. All right, so let's do this real quick. Let's jump into this. All right, let's go a little early into our. All right, sometimes we be late, so we be early.
We give thanks and praise to the Most High God for the divine spark that set our cells into perpetual motion. We give thanks for the magnetism of the Most Holy, the magnetism that repels and attracts the ferry boats of light 60,000 miles every 60 seconds throughout our vessels and caves. We give thanks for the ability to drink clean water every 60 minutes, flooding the river of life. We give thanks that sugar has not covered our ferries and turned them into stone. We give thanks that darkness has not covered the riverbanks with calcium and turned them into stone. We give thanks that anger and fear have not turned our almonds bitter, turning our heart to stone. We give thanks for smooth sailing upstream through the valley of death, through the superior vena cava into the right atrium. We give thanks for smooth sailing around the heart through the corona crown, joining the vortex in the right atrium. We give thanks for the perfect black solar repeater that induces the primary electromagnetic wave, opening the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim closes. We give thanks to the ray wave, reflecting on the semi-lunar valves, opening a pathway to the vineyard. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the lunar gate to the vineyard closes. We give thanks to the Most High God that provides the light and our breath, and the light in our breath. We give thanks for the fine olfactory system that makes our grapes ripe with light. We give thanks for the Djed pillar that provides us with a stable fleet of ferry boats to dock in our vineyard. We give thanks for smooth sailing through the pulmonary vein into the storm of the left atrium. We give thanks for the perfect black solar repeater that induces the primary electromagnetic wave, opening the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the mouth of the Kodesh HaKodeshim closes. We give thanks to the ray wave, reflecting on the semi-lunar valves, opening a pathway into the holy royal arch of the Wa scepter. We give thanks for the mechanical wave produced when the lunar gate into the holy royal arch of the Wa scepter closes. We give thanks for the magnetism of the Most Holy, the magnetism that repels and attracts the ferry boats of light 60,000 miles every 60 seconds throughout our vessels and our caves. Amen.
Okay. So now, hold on. So now let's take a look at let's take a look at a variable or at least an idea. Let's take a look at an idea of a variable. Right now, in the, let's pull out this book real quick. Oh man, I don't know where my copy. Well, I have my favorite copy. Ooh. The hardcover, but my page count in this was going to be different from your page count. Yeah, if you can afford this, this is a magnificent book to have. The hard copy, it's expensive. The hard copy of the dope book, this is expensive, but it is a beautiful book. It is a beautiful book. Normally, when we on a live, I don't mess with it because my page count is going to be different than your page count. And then when I try to give you a reference, you won't be able to find the reference. Right? Okay. So mitochondrial phenotype as a driver of the racial dichotomy in obesity and insulin resistance, right? It's an article. Most prolific article, like this right here. You know what? I wish I had RFK phone number. Yeah, RFK need me in his cabinet. I wonder if RFK have a cabinet. I don't know if he has a cabinet. He need me in his cabinet on his team or something. He need me to come in and hit him in the head. Hey, he need that forceful delivery, but it's some science that he need to have at his disposal to be able to slap folks upside the head with, right? This article is one. This article is a game changer, right? But mitochondrial phenotype as a driver of racial dichotomy in obesity and insulin resistance. Now, the article's long. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but like the third subsection of the article is mitochondrial substrate preference, right? Mitochondrial substrate preference, right? So I know it's getting, it's getting big. It's getting wordy. It's getting big words. It's getting a little wordy, right? But substrate preference, right? So when we talk about obesity and insulin resistance, mitochondrial substrate preference, that's basically saying there's a variable, there's like a race determined variable in how your mitochondria metabolize and store energy. Scientifically, though, this is the ultimate variable. This is the variable that determines if you have a chance of becoming like what your possibilities and probabilities are for developing, for becoming obese or insulin resistant. And then we know insulin resistant is melanin concentrating hormone resistant in terms of neurochemistry. Interesting, right? Reduced mitochondrial content and respiratory capacity have been reported in African American women, which is accompanied by lower maximum coupled and uncoupled respiration rates. Boom, bam, boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, bam. Boom, bam, boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, boom, bam, bam, boom, bam, bam. Right? Preferential input of electrons into cytochrome 1 via NAD-linked substrates in African Americans, right? So you have, right? You have right? That's your electron transport chain, right? Cytochrome 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is 5. That's the ATPase. This is where ATP is recycled. This is here where water is recycled. This is where your sugar goes, your fat goes, or at least the electrons, right? Your sugar electrons, your fat electrons, right? This is the bank. That's the bank, right? That's collecting, right? So the sugar electrons go there, NAD, right? The FAD, the fat electrons go here, and then they kind of get, they get piled up here. They go here. Water is recycled, right? So we have a whole book on this called Mitochondrial Water, right? That's your other source. That's your other source of water, right? Mitochondrial water, right? But there's a difference in the preference here in all of the downstream and upstream biochemistry. It's a whole bunch of different chemical reactions that happens to facilitate cytochrome 2 action. A whole bunch of chemical reactions happens to facilitate cytochrome 1 action, right? Is this saying that white people don't have one or black people don't have the other? No. What it's saying is that there's a preference for equatorial people here, and there's a preference for polar people here, right? And it makes sense if you think about the environments, right? The cold region. If you're from a cold region, you need to store more fat, visceral fat, right? The fat that's around your organs, right? To keep your organs warm, to keep them functioning, right? It makes sense, right? If you're in a hot region, you need to store your fat more subcutaneous, right? Because you don't really need the fat, right? Fat's going to increase your risk of having a heart attack or a stroke, right? So you want to have it as close as possible to the muscle so that you can burn it faster. That's why you have it subcutaneous. It gives your muscle the ability to burn it off faster, right? So how you store fat is different. How you process fat, how you process sugar. If you notice, there's no cytochrome for protein because protein it's not here. It doesn't play a role here. Protein gets turned into sugar. Excess protein gets turned into sugar. So that's a whole universe and a whole conversation in and of itself, right? But in the probability book, what we talk about, well, one of the things we talk about, and we'll jump around a little bit, is, well, it's probably easier for me to just show you inside the book, right? We have this little chart here, and any personal trainer should be familiar with this chart. Any personal trainer should be kind of familiar with this chart. All right, because that's your turn up. That's your turn up numbers. That's the turn up numbers right there. So any personal trainer, like a real personal trainer, not a guy that got a bunch of big muscles from prison or from the park, and so, you know, hang out with him for an hour, he charge you $25. No, somebody that did some studying, read some books, got a certification from somewhere, right? You learn there's a level of activity, right? There's a level of activity where your body switches gears, right? So this is the bottom end, right? The electron transport chain, and we're talking about electrons and sugar and fat and how you store fat and all this. That's the bottom end, right? But you also have the top end where sugar and fat is metabolized, right? That's from your muscle activity. That's from your skeletal activity, right? That's when your body's putting it into motion. That's when the potential energy is being converted into kinetic energy, right? And so depending on how hard you're going is going to determine what your body primarily uses, right? Is your body running through sugar, or is your body looking to start burning fat, right? And that's primarily based on what your heart is doing, right? Because your heart is the center of your health, right? And so when you drive your heart to a certain level, your heart starts to using fatty acids, right? And so that's the measure of, you know, like how your car, right? Your car. So that's what we also gonna have switch it up. Like, you know, you got the Kelly Blue Book. We gonna have the Maa.T Blue Book. Yeah, we're gonna have the Maa.T Blue Book. You know, they got Kelly Blue Book. We're gonna have the Maa.T Blue Book. Right? We're gonna start ranking Blue Book. You know, what's your body, what's your Maa.T Blue Book value? What's the Blue Book value of your vehicle? Your physical body, your physical vehicle. What is the Blue Book value on that machine you got? Yeah, because if we both 6 feet tall, we both 190 pounds, but you smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day, that joint that you got right there, that vehicle you in right there, that the Blue Book value on this body here, or the Blue Book value on listen, it's a different Blue Book value, right? So we're gonna have the Maa.T Blue Book value based on the Kelly Blue Book value. You know, we're gonna have to spin off, right? There's the cars, and then there's the human vehicle, the human machine, right? And so you got RPMs, you got BPMs, right? Beats per minute, right? Or when you're talking about beats per minute, right? When we talked about congestive heart failure, we talked about what that meant, right? What did that mean? How much blood, right, is ejected from the ventricles, right? How much, what's the blood ejection, or what's the total cardiac output, right? Every minute, right? RPM, revolutions per minute, same thing. That's what your body is doing. Blood is going around the circuit, right? Right? So your cardiac output is the same. Your car is based on, right? So based on that RPM, right, or the BPM, right, That's where you get these numbers here. Yeah, so personal trainers, they're taught this to target heart health, to target cardiovascular health, to target fat burning. Right? It's the target fat burning range. Right? And over the years, you've had some folks like debunk it. You've had some folks debunk it. And then you've had some folks like debunk it. You've had some folks debunk it and then rebunk it. Like the science fell out of favor. And then, you know, folks got a little too deep and then went all the way through, you know, the rabbit hole and came out on the other end and came back around to it. Like, no, you know, when we study heart attacks, and I always reference this, but you can tell how much you need to have a book by how many times I tell you you should get the book. Where is this book? Bam. Osiris, Diabetes and Respiration. Right? Osiris, Diabetes and Respiration. Let me see. Human normal blasts, which comprise less than 0.2% of the total cell mass in the human body, collectively replicate about 4 kilometers of DNA every second. This is nearly 12 times faster than the speed of sound, which travels at 0.34 kilometers per second in the air. This is just here. Blah, blah, blah. Catalase converts 26 million to 40 million hydrogen peroxide molecules in water and oxygen per second. Okay, hold on. Okay, hold on. There we go. Is this it right here? There is a whole nother universe in heart health that we have yet to fully explore. Cardiac glycosides. These are produced and help to convert potentially poisonous lactic acid in the heart into pyruvate. The heart is the only muscle tissue that prefers ketones and fatty acids. Those fuels burn clean. When fight or flight kicks in, your heart opens up the sugar kitchen. Glycolysis fuels the fight or flight. The same thing when you smoke weed or get high on something else that leads to your heart racing. The acceleration usually comes with a cost. Lactic acid residue from glycolysis in the myocardial cells. This blocks calcium from getting into the cells and eventually stops them from contracting. It's like somebody bumping the DJ table repeatedly until the music stops. The ruptured arteries happen as a result of this alternate dirty fuel. Right? So what am I talking about here? And this is on page 145. Right? This is on page 145. What I'm talking about here is how you condition the heart. How you condition the heart, right? How you condition the heart. So we even talk about, I think it's the Ebers-Papers volume 4, or it might be in the probability book. Wait, I don't even think the Ebers-Papers volume 4 is out yet. Yeah, I don't think it's out yet. Yeah, I think I was gonna release it this weekend, but I was still trying to get the Money Mind State book to the Patreon folks. So what I'm gonna do is, though, I'm gonna find another book to get y'all that's exclusive. Yeah, I'm gonna find another book to get y'all that's exclusive, since Freddie can put a link up to just share the book to everybody. That's not what the intention was, Freddie. it's all good. It's, once you release the information, you can't really, it's release. But that feeling when you exercise and you push it to the limit and you're like, when you can, you know, your chest feel like it's burning, right? That's when you're taking your heart to the limit. That's when you're taking your lungs to the limit, right? That's when you've taken your pH. When you've dropped your pH, right? When you drop your pH, right? That's what literally is a part of your endurance. That's the other side to the lactic acid thing, right? So inside the muscles, you have endurance, right? Based on lactic acid building up in the muscle. At least that was an older, you know, some of these models for how the body works, they come into favor and go out of favor as new information is learned, right? But the other part to it is your pH. The other part to it is your pH. The main thing that controls your blood pH is gas, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. So as you exercise harder, right, you're converting, you're metabolizing, right? As you're metabolizing, your muscles is kicking out more and more and more carbon dioxide. The more carbon dioxide gets into your blood, right, the lower your pH goes, right? As this is happening, this is where the oblong square, right? This is where the oblong square, the medulla oblongata, right? And then the Botzinger complex inside the medulla oblongata, this is where they come into play because they start changing the rhythm of how you're breathing, right? You need to breathe faster, right? You need more oxygen, right? Your respiratory rate has to stay coupled to the metabolism. The harder you work the muscle, the faster your body has to metabolize sugar for energy. The faster the metabolism runs, the faster the respiratory system has to run to keep up with it, right? And the faster and harder you work the body, it determines what you're burning, whether you're burning sugar or you're burning fat. So when you see bodybuilders, right? Now, mind you, this is how you take control of variables in terms of energy storage and metabolism, right? So we still having a probability conversation, just in case you didn't know, right? But bodybuilders, when they're working out, you know, and it's like the old adage, you know, now a lot of bodybuilders, they don't want to hear that. So they make sure they're flexible and they can run. But back in the days, bodybuilders couldn't run because they didn't do no cardio. They didn't do no cardio because they didn't want to lose no muscle. They didn't want to lose no size, right? But that's why you have guys like Anatoly. I don't know if y'all seen Anatoly. Anatoly exposes the bodybuilders. He exposes bodybuilders. Like he does it in a funny way. It's humorous. Remember, we talked about humor, right? Being able to deal with certain things, but that's what he does. He basically exposes them. Anatoly, for the people that don't know, he's the guy who dresses up like a janitor or like an old senior citizen. And he comes with the accent and he pretends like, oh, excuse me, is this a weight? Is this is heavy weight? And then he comes and he'll pick up the weight that, you know, like a big bodybuilder is struggling with. He'll come and lift it up with one hand or two, you know, like he'll just, and the whole thing is he's a small, relatively skinny guy compared to these big bodybuilders that be struggling with the weights, right? And so the idea of needing to be really big or whatever to lift weights at a certain level, you know, he destroys that concept. You know what I'm saying? Which is why a lot of bodybuilders, they never do the cardio because they don't want to lose any size. And so they'll make up heart rate with intensity and speed with repetition and power, right? So they still get some kind of exercise in terms of pushing their heart, right? But a lot of bodybuilders had heart attacks, which is another reason why they're getting more into cardio over the last decade or so, right? They're realizing they need the protective effects. They need the cardio protective effects in order to be even good weightlifters, right? But on the front end, you're controlling these variables by selecting what you eat, fiber content, whatever the case may be. On the back end, how hard you working out, right? And so what we start to do over the next couple of books is taking a look at these numbers in terms of what vitality really means, like in terms of numbers, right? We start in the Ebers Papers, Volume 3. Then we go into the probability book. We tap into it a little bit more, and we'll keep on building on the concept. Right? Because you look here, just a couple of things you can see. As you get older, the top end speed of what you can do with your heart is reduced, right? And it's common sense. At least you think that way. It's common sense, right? The older you get, the less stress you could put on your heart, right? So if you look on the left right there, those numbers are ages from 18 to 20, right? You can run the heart RPM, you can run that BPM up to 140. 71 to 75, they don't want to push it past 104, right? Beats per minute. 104 beats per minute, that's the top end, right? But what you want to do is you want to break these molds, right? You want to break these molds. You want to be per se, right? I'm in this group, right? I'm 46 to 50. I'm in here, right? But I be trying to run my heart like a 30-year-old. Right? I be trying to run my heart like a 30-year-old. I'll be trying to push my luck. I ain't trying to drop dead. Right? But I be trying to push it because, right? That's where the health is. Right? If you just at the number that your age is supposed to be at, technically you ain't really, you getting ready to clock on up out of here. Right? You getting ready to clock up out of here. You need to get, you try to get that heart rate up to a level where, right? And the thing is, the way you slow down your resting heart rate is by speeding up your active heart rate, right? The way you slow down your resting heart rate is how fast your heart is going when you're chilling. Right now, I'm talking to y'all standing here. This is resting heart rate for me, right? So the speed that my heart is going right now is what really determines my health. And you want your heart to be at 60 beats per minute. So when we're looking at this number, there's an assumption that's happening. When we're looking at these numbers, the assumption is happening is that when you're 18 to 20 years old, your heart is beating at 60 beats per minute. Optimum health, 60 beats per minute. So you can take your heart over 200 RPM, right? Over 200% rather, right? Because 60 beats per minute, 200% is 120 beats per minute. 140 is over 200%. And then as you get older, you don't have that ability, right? Because your resting heart rate is getting so high, right? To the point where your resting heart rate might be 100. you in the high blood pressure space. So as a trainer, you get taught people with high blood pressure, they can't exercise but so much, right? They have to do these types of exercises, or people that are obese or with diabetes. The reason why is because there's too much pressure you put on the system fails. You get congestive heart failure in an instant. Boop, heart attack. Whereas congestive heart failure is basically that same process happening over a long period of time. Yeah, you're living in a slow heart attack, right? And this is why, as I was reading these articles over the years, I started to notice a trend, and we started talking about it, is people having troponin levels. Troponin levels. Just think about Tripoli, the shores of Tripoli, right? Troponins. I don't know. That's a mnemonic I use to remember it. You know what I'm saying? But troponins is a protein that your heart makes when your heart is in distress, having a heart attack. And you're not supposed to have none of those in your blood. When they check your blood, you're not supposed to have zero. You're supposed to have zero troponins. Over the years, people start having a little bit, right? And that little bit starting to be a little bit more. little bit more. So that means that we're living in such a stressful situation that we're like low-key having silent, long-term type of like faint heart attacks. Like we just like living out one big nightmare, some of us. Our life is so stressful. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. And these are the variables, again, going back to the insurance companies, health companies. This how they know when you're going to die. Yeah, that's how they know when you're going to die. They calculating. They divination. They're divining with the best of them, right? They putting in all the variables, pop, 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 running the numbers. Yeah. Like, yeah, okay. July 7, the year will be 2033 or 2037. Yeah, he's clocking out. He's gonna clock out this day from this, if not from this, from that. Right? And when you're quote unquote healthy, right? Healthy means that you have a lot of variables. Healthy means you have a lot of variables. The more variables you have, the more possibilities you have. The more possibilities you have, the more potential for longevity you have, right? As you get older, you're losing variables, right? Or if you have a health condition, you start to lose variables and they start to be able to lock you in. Oh, congestive heart failure. Whoop. We can eliminate all these variables. We got you. Yeah, he probably gonna get another 10 years tops out of that heart. He's up out of here. Boop. Yeah, we already know what's associated with that. We already know congestive heart failure, chronic magnesium deficiency, selenium deficiency, essential fatty acids. We already know. And even if they try to fix it right now, we know they diet, they life. We know what this is. Yeah, 10 years tops, right? We plug in some other variables, we might be able to narrow them down. 3 years, 7.5 years, right? Oh, diabetes, we know what that window look like. What's that, type 1 or type 2? Okay, type 1, okay. So what we thinking, first amputation at 35? Or type 2, okay, first amputation when, 56? Okay, bet. First amputation, 56. What's the economic status? Okay, bet. Yeah. First amputation, 56. Probably won't make 6 years after that. Yeah, because once the amputation happens, then other things kick in, right? How much can you move and exercise at that point? A lot less. So now obesity, circulation, blood clots. Yeah, all these things quadruple now. All the risk factors quadruple now, right? Because of the limitations, right? And you don't have the potential as you did before, right? You can't just go jump rope. Yeah, you just jump rope. Go get you a $6. Go get you a $10 jump rope. Yeah, go get you a $10 jump rope. Yeah, and just have your next meal loaded with garlic. Yeah, that simple solution. Go get you a jump rope and load up your next meal with garlic. Oh, that's out the window already. You already got collapsed capillaries. You already got collapsed capillaries, pinched nerves, right? Pinched nerves creating pain. Now look at this set of domino of it. You got a pinched nerve creating pain. You don't understand pinched nerves. So you immediately in trouble. You feeling pain. You want the pain to stop. So you're taking a drug. Bad move, right? Painkiller, bad move, right? So now the pain limits your mobility because you don't know that you're supposed to work through the pain. So you start to go into resting up. So now the area that you're resting becomes starved for blood. You adapt these habits, right? See, this is what we was talking about in the 360 books. This is how you develop those compensation posture problems, right? Where you get the pain over here, so now you're compensating, right? So now because you take these postures to compensate, you have a whole bunch of muscles on one side of your body that's not getting any exercise. If they're not getting exercise, that means they're getting less blood, which means what? Less oxygen, less nutrition. That means the nerves on that side are starving, right? So the nerves will start to atrophy, right? And when you lose nerve connectivity, now the muscles can't really fire. And when that's the effect they have on the muscles. But then as the nerves start to atrophy from the fat, you don't get fat metabolism or fat mobilization, let me say, right? Because when you think about fat storage, right? When you think about fat storage, right? So you got fat, sugar, right? Because it's glucose 6-phosphate, right? For the most part, right? Stored in the fat cells or the fat tissue. It's your nerves that tell the fat cells to kind of empty that out into the blood so the muscles can burn it, right? But if you lose nerve connectivity to the fat tissue, right, you don't really have the communication from the brain getting to the tissue, right? In order for anything to happen, brain, spine, tissue, right? So the even if you cortisoled up, fight or flight, it still ain't gonna have the same effect if you have the nerve issue, right? The nerve issue sometimes can come from the blood issue, right? Poor blood, right? Poor bone development, poor blood, right? So it's variables, right? It's variables. We're changing variables while you have the ability, while it's easy to do. While it's easy to do, right? You smoking cigarettes, you gotta stop smoking. It's not that deep. And you gotta do it before you get in the situation where you can't do it. Right? You gotta do it before you get in the situation where you can't do it. And then you angry with everybody else because you can't change your outcome fast enough. You can't change your outcome fast enough because you done limited your possibilities, and probabilities done started crystallizing into realities that you don't really you don't want. Right? Before the doctor said you need aspirin, you could just start on garlic. It's a blood thinner. Aspirin, blood thinner, garlic, blood thinner. Right? Add you some garlic to the food. You might need a lot, right? Get the walking, get your steps in, right? Circulation, right? Circulation, bone pressure, neurochemistry, right? They go together, right? When you start walking, you increase the circulation, you increase the pressure on the bones, the piezoelectric pressure, but you also increase the blood levels of tryptophan, right? You increase the blood levels of tryptophan, tranquility, signals the brain for endorphins, right? So when you change one variable, you're building on variables, right? So back in Kemet, you teaching this, right, with the dice. Now we trying to change different type of variables with dice. I know we had a long conversation to circle all the way back to dice, but you in the neighborhood, you trying to change different types of variables, right? You trying to come up. You trying to throw them dice so you could just get this rent money right now, this one roll. What's the probability I can't pay this light bill this month? Listen, I'm getting ready to throw these dice and try to pay this light, this Con Edison real quick. You know what I'm saying? Now you lose. You know what I'm saying? You might not be able to pay Con Edison for $3. You playing around, right? So, in a situational, in a home setting, right? Dice can be a powerful tool for divination or, probability. And that's how you got to teach your babies early on. That's the thing that children need to know before they get out into the world, right? Probability. Cause and effect is probability, right? When you're struggling, you're like, okay, I'm trying to get I'm a new parent. I'm trying to get my children, I'm trying to move to a better neighborhood. You're trying to move to a better neighborhood for what? For what? You're trying to move to a better neighborhood to change these variables. Because chances are, is a higher chance of my sons, if they stay in this neighborhood right here, because the streets is a short stop. Either you're slinging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. Right? So you're trying to change some variables. Like, okay, I changed my area code. I get over here, probabilities may change. Now, when you take the kid out the city, you still can't take the city out the kid. So it's not 100%, but you change the probabilities. You create some options, right? When you change the diet, you change some options. When you start adding vitamins and minerals and herbs in, you start adding more options, adding more variables. When you add an exercise routine, you start adding back more variables, right? There's a space where everybody benefits. But then based on your specificity and what your goals are, what you're trying to do, and what your condition is, what your Maa.T Blue Book value is on your body, right? Is your body good for another 100,000 miles? Or is that thing a lemon? Is your body a lemon? Is that thing getting ready to conk out after another 100 miles or what? Is your body built to get you another 100,000 miles, or is your body going to conk out after? Yeah, is your body just good enough to get you back and forth to work? You know, I'm just getting me a little hoopty to get me back and forth. You know what I'm saying? But I ain't driving long distance with this thing. This ain't ready for long distance. Is your body ready to go long distance? Right? Yeah, we got to think that way. Right? So those are the changes. And as we're going through the Ebers Papers book and we're talking about the herbs and medicine and healing and health, and I need this to become crystallized. I need this to become a reality in a way that you're thinking, so that you're not thinking, you know, because Dr. Sebi created like a Michael Jordan, you know, that commercial with Michael Jordan, like, maybe it's my fault. Maybe I led you to believe that you could just hit every game winning. The legend of Dr. Sebi has got falsified. It's got fantasized. It's got legend. You know, it's turned into myth and magic. And, you know, there's people walking around believing they can have sex with condoms and get full-blown AIDS on Monday, and they're going to take a herb Monday night, and when they wake up Tuesday morning, poof, they're going to be free of AIDS. Like, that's that's the furthest thing from the truth. You're not going to have stage 4 cancer on Monday, pop a herb, and then on Tuesday you straight. That's not it. That's not it. You're changing variables. You're changing variables, and you need time to change variables. And the first thing you need to know is the biochemistry of whatever your problem is. Right? As we start to understand, okay, there's an international epidemic of doctor, nurse, and hospital shortage. Like, there's not enough hospital to go around. So part of that, we could blame the system. But the larger part of that is our ignorance of how to take care of our own bodies. Right? Most people that's in the emergency room don't belong there. It's not the hospital fault, it's your fault. What are you doing there? Why didn't you know how to prevent that? Once you didn't prevent it, why don't you know how to treat that at home? Right? So part of it we could blame the system, but the other half is our fault. Right? And this is every country, everywhere around the world. It's a hospital problem. Whether you look at the American system, where the hospitals, you know, the emergency rooms are over flooded, right? And there's no doctors in the hospitals. There's a whole bunch of residents and students, right? And then, or you look at like systems like Canada, where it's free healthcare for everybody, but you might bleed to death waiting to get into a hospital because your appointment might be 6 months, 12 months. You got congestive heart failure. You ain't getting to the doctor until 9 months later. Right? So the future, and I've been saying this for the longest, the future of healthcare is not holistic or medical. It's some combination of the two, because rich people don't make these type of choices that we have to make. They have a staff. They got a medical guy. They got their surgeon, you know, and they not even have one surgeon. They got the best surgeons of each surgeon. They got the top brain, the top heart guy, the top cardio, whatever. Like, yeah, they got the top nutritionists. They got the top holistic folks. They got the top they got their chef on deck. So they're not making choices like, oh, I'm going to the hospital or I'm going to see my naturopath, or I'm going to see my nutritionist. No, they're seeing and. They're doing and. We're doing or, they're doing and. Right? And so when you do or, you did what? You limited variables. You do and, you have more variables. Now, I'm going to the doctor. I'm going to see what the doctors say. And then I'm going to go to my naturopathic guy and see what my naturopathic guy say. Yeah, I'm going to weigh my options. Right? I'm going to weigh my options and see what, yeah. After I leave my naturopathic guy, I'm going to call up my chiropractor. Yeah. I'm ready to call up my chiropractor and see what he say. Yeah, I'm not going to get, do I need to go see a neurosurgeon or orthopedic surgeon? Or do I just need to go, do I just need to go to a little sweat retreat maybe and get this thing stretched out, sweat out some, I'm going to have to put this thing together. Right? Put this thing together and see what my best options are. What's my best chance of success for whatever I view success as? Being able to get back to work or getting pain free or, whatever the case may be. Right? So again, for the people that couldn't follow along in our Kanye conversation, right? I just wanted to rehash the probability conversation to try to make a little bit more sense, right? A little bit more sense, and then we'd be able to see actually, make sure y'all go get y'all bags, right? Go get y'all Dr. EnQi bags. Right? Go to the website, AmericanHealer.website, click the 3 lines, and go to the merchandise, right? You got the shirts, right? This is on the website. Yeah, this is our shirt. Just in case y'all don't know, this is our shirt. So you can go get this at the website. Yeah, you can go get that bag that I almost tripped over and broke my neck. Right? But right? Remember that? Right? Where we draw like a representation of a cube. Right? We draw like a representation of a cube. Right? But that's almost the same, right? That's the dice. Right? That's a dice. But that's the same as right? Right? Just a different way to draw the cube, right? Right? Different way to draw the cube, right? I'm drawing this cube with 6 triangles, right? This is a cube, a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional object, right? A cube or a dice, a die, right? Is it a die like this? Yeah, I think it's die, right? We're gonna roll with it. Or is it die? We're gonna roll with that, right? Cube, right? But at the same time, right? That's a hexagon, right? That's a hexagon, right? 6 sides, 6 lines, right? So this is what they came with. This is what they came with. This is what they came with. Right? 4,000-5,000 years ago. This is still what we on right now. Look, let me show you this. This is still what we on. Let me see. Let's go to the National Library of Medicine real quick. Look, let's just go here real quick. Let's go to the National Library of Medicine real quick. Just so we could bring it home for a couple of folks. All right? Probability, clinical decision making, and hypothesis testing. Few clinicians grasp the true concept of probability expressed in the p-value. For most, a statistically significant p-value is the end of the search for truth. In fact, the opposite is the case. The present paper attempts to put the p-value in proper perspective by explaining different types of probabilities, their role in clinical decision-making, medical research, and hypothesis testing. Right? Now, we're not going to go through this whole thing. We're not going to go through this whole thing. Right? But I just wanted to highlight this real quick. I just want to highlight this real quick so you can get the idea that hypotheses, right? The whole idea of what we call the scientific theory is built around probability and statistics. So even the search for science is probability and statistics, right? Because you're making an observation. Right? You make an observation without even going to observer effect and the deep end. But observation, you do an experiment, right? Hypothesis. Observation, hypothesis, experiment. Those are the three fundamental aspects of the scientific theory. Right? Your hypothesis is a prediction. It's an educated guess based on statistics. You're using statistical models that base your hypothesis off, your educated guess on. Then you're running some experiments to see if you can validate, right? Quantitatively or qualitatively validate whatever your prediction was, whatever you thought, whatever you came up with. Yeah, whatever you came up with. Right? So I'm just saying, I don't want you to think that this conversation that we're having is not the conversation that's being had in academia at the highest level. Right? Oh, we can switch. Hold on. We can switch and go here. Right? We can go to the AMA Journal of Ethics. Right? Evidence-based medicine, a science of uncertainty and an art of probability. A science of uncertainty and an art of probability. That is how William Osler portrayed medicine as he practiced it at the turn of the last century. But he may as well have been describing the current era of evidence-based medicine. The moniker evidence-based made its debut in the early 1990s as Gordon Guyatt, a physician at McMaster University, first described the term. Clinicians were formerly taught to look to authority, whether a textbook, a lecturer, or a local senior physician to resolve issues of patient management. Evidence-based medicine uses additional strategies, including quickly tracking down publications of studies that are directly relevant to the clinical problem, critically appraising these studies, and applying the results of the best studies to the clinical problem at hand. So, again, just for the people that ask, why is there so many like encyclopedia, etymology, dictionary, Wikipedia, scientific journal articles, and why is there so much of that kind of stuff in the books, right? In our books, right? This is the reason why, right? You need to have multiple vantage points to give you, right? Because the problem with the medical establishment, right, is that they're usually about 20 to 30 years out, right? New information that comes out, they didn't learn that stuff in medical school. The doctors in the hospitals, the doctor in the hospital graduated medical school, like an actual doctor, a doctor, like an attending physician. An attending physician probably graduated school on average like 20 or 30 years ago. Whenever, like if you go to your hospital right now, the average attending physician probably graduated medical school 30 years ago. So the stuff that's coming out today wasn't taught in school when he was in school, right? Respectfully, holistic space is even worse. The holistic space is even worse. Yeah, think about the folks running around still talking about what Dr. Sebi was talking about. That was 50 years ago. The holistic space is worse. Yeah. And it sounds good when we say, yeah, the problem with the medical establishment, they're 30 years behind. We'll be like, yo, the holistic folks is 50 years behind. It almost feel like an insult. You're like, EnQi, I'm about to turn this off. Don't you start talking about Dr. Sebi. You got to stay update to the information. You got to stay update to the information. What do you think Dr. Sebi was doing? What do you think Dr. Sebi beef was with Elijah Muhammad? Yeah, that's what Dr. Sebi was running around saying. He was like, yo, y'all still on that Elijah Muhammad program? You know how old that Elijah Muhammad program is? What are y'all doing? This is the 80s. This is the 70s. What are y'all doing still on that Elijah Muhammad program? That's outdated. Don't eat pork. You know how many things we need to add to the do not eat list? More than pork? So he outlined a super long list. Like, no, we're not eating this. We're not eating this. We're not eating this. We're not eating this. And folks start getting better. Right? But that doesn't take away from the genius of what Elijah Muhammad and them put together when they came with their do not eat list. Yeah. Because the current state of the people improved when they started to follow the program. Dr. Sebi further refined it. And when people started to follow that, even more people started to improve. Right? So we got to keep that going. Not do not eat list, the research, right? The research and the constant refinement, right? The constant refinement with the up-to-date knowledge, right? We have to keep learning. And we're at a situation now where learning in and of itself is becoming outdated. And the craziest thing is we have the best tools available to learn. Social media. Social media is the ultimate learning tool, but we don't use it for that. We use it for entertainment and gossip. Because the social media companies have commercialized the platforms and they realize, the old saying, you catch more bees with honey than vinegar, right? And when you're learning, a part of learning is unlearning. So you have to hear things that don't necessarily make you feel good, right? You have to hear things that don't necessarily reinforce your core ideals, right? So those things produce cortisol in you, small amounts, stress. Like, hold up, EnQi, you attacking my way of life. You attacking my, you want me to give up this. I love this. I don't want to give that up, right? So we get anxious. We get cortisol when we are in a learning environment. When we're in a gossip environment, when we're in an entertainment environment, it's just dopamine. Dopamine and endorphins. So we're getting high. So the platforms, not, necessarily 100% out of conspiracy, but just to optimize their financial growth, they curtail it so that it's more dopamine driven to keep you more addicted, to keep you on longer, right? And so the information that may be good for you, but that doesn't necessarily fit the business model, right? That's why you got to have books. That's another reason why you got to have books, right? I was in the supermarket and I was talking with somebody in the supermarket about what happens when everything goes online. There's a blackout. I'm gonna light a candle and read my books. Same thing I've been doing, right? But you gotta have books, right? We gotta build ourselves up. And the crazy thing is gonna happen. This is another reason why I think the Department of Defense recognized this and why they invest in so much money, like that branch of the government. It's not that it's not an important thing that the government shouldn't invest in it, but to have that branch of the government, Department of Defense, investing in studying of the mind, right? Figuring out where the information is stored that supersedes the DNA. It tells you about the nature of that information and the state of the world today, right? Because it's dangerous, that type of power. Because we're getting to a space where it's going to be fallout. People fire. I mean, not fallout like riot and stuff like that, but it's going to be fallout when people figure out that they've exported knowledge that's supposed to go passed down to their children, right? And not only that, genetic diversity plays a role in extinction, because genetic diversity is one of the main factors to your innate immunity. Information about the world around you plays a role in your innate immunity. Your mind is attached to your immune system. The dumber you are, the weaker your immune system is. Just to make it plain for the people all the way in the back, the dumber you are, the weaker your immune system is. Like, there's a bunch of other factors, so it's not like you're going to read a book and you're going to be, but the dumber you are, the weaker your immune system is, right? These are facts, right? I'm oversimplifying it, but these are facts, right? So genetic diversity has an impact when people are, largely functionally illiterate. So as the math literacy level goes down, as people understand less math, right? And this probability math, some people are interested in it because it's applications in medicine, in law, in, law enforcement, in politics, banking, being able to predict financial markets and stuff like that. Some people are interested in the conversation because, divination, spirituality, whoop. But, the thing is, people can't count. Even if you understand what probability is, the definition of it, if people cannot count, Like count. Like go to the store and purchase something for 63 cents, hand the cashier $1 and figure out how much change you need to get back. If people cannot do simple arithmetic, it's no probability math. You're not, that's not it. You're not going, that's not. So you're effectively blind if you can't count. And so all manner of catastrophe is on the table. Your possibilities and probabilities is just ugly, right? So as we're going through the Ebers Patterson, we're going through conditions, right? We're going through conditions. We're like, okay, these are the herbs and these things apply, apply these herbs this way, diabetes or whatever. Like let's look at something, right? If we look at cataracts, what is this? This volume 2, page 51. We look at cataracts, right? Cataracts is a big deal, right? As we start to go through this, right, what we're talking about is variables. What we're talking about is variables, right? When we start to talk about carnosine, right? Carnosine is a variable. Carnosine is a variable, right? When we talk about lanosterol, this is a variable, right? We're changing variables, right? Lanosterol breaks down protein aggregation, right? Protein aggregates is what makes up cataracts, right? So I'm just flipping through the book, giving you an example. These are variables, right? But what about the variables that cause the protein aggregation in the first place? Right? All right. I'm talking out of depth. I'm talking out of depth probably just because I haven't went live all weekend. I'm working on a surprise book, something epic.